Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next session. So this is a session that we had initially planned at before the panel discussion, but we had to move due to our a few technical difficulties. So thanks for your patience and thanks for the availability of Sabine, who will be presenting us on the topic prioritization and decision making in an environment of continuous change. So I have already introduced Sabine, so yeah, you already know her. So with this, I give you the stage. Off to you, Sabine.
Thanks a lot, and apologies for the technical problems. So try another time. So we all know that making good, fast decisions is challenging under the best circumstances, but the trickiest are those which are called big bets, so unfamiliar, high-stakes decisions. So when you have a crisis of uncertainties, as we have now with COVID-19 pandemic, organizations face a potential paralyzing volume of these big bet decisions. The typical approach of many companies, if you go to the next slide, will be far too slow to keep up in such turbulences. Postponing decisions to wait for more information might make sense during business as usual, but when in case the environment is uncertain and defined really by urgency and imperfect information, but waiting in itself is another decision, is a decision in itself. So, for instance, delaying the decision to cancel non-critical surgeries can mean not freeing up physicians and hospital capacity now and potentially exposing or infecting more people. If we go to the next slide. I won't present a specific case study today, though we had to make bold decisions quickly over the past year in our organization. What I would like to present to you are 5 principles we apply more and more in these uncertain times, which are described in literature and latest research as well. So the headlines for those 5 principles are: take a breath, involve more people, make the critical small choices, and set up a network of cross-functional teams, and empower leaders with judgment and character. If we go to the first, if you go to the next slide and look at take a breath. In a crisis atmosphere, it's tempting to jump from one urgent task to the next, to take charge of what's right in front of you and to just execute. But this turned often out to be a big mistake, and research shows that a simple act of pausing, even for a few seconds, allows the brain to focus on the most relevant information. In sports, prioritization and decision-making is as important as in pharmaceutical or other industries for success. So there's the hockey player, Wayne Gretzky, and when he was asked what makes a great hockey player, he said, a good hockey player plays where the puck is, and a great hockey player plays where the puck is going to be. So this is actually where we all would ideally like to be, but it's much easier said than done. Another, I think, very dramatic example of a leader who paused during a landscape scale crisis is the pilot or Captain Chesley Sullenberg, who then after a bird strike caused both of his plane engines to fail shortly after takeoff from the LaGuardia airport in January 2009. He had very little time to decide whether to try to land at a nearby airport, as a control tower was urging him, or to aim for a water landing. So with no training of such scenario, he stopped and reflected for a matter of seconds, and all that he could afford to determine if he could get to the airport safely, and instead pivoted to the Hudson River for landing. As we all know, these 155 people on board survived. There are several ways decision makers can take a breath. So one, I think we are applying often is telling our team, we need a moment to think and try to get a broader perspective. Also, imagine yourself above the fray, so observing the landscape from above. So this is what is called a balcony perspective. Despite the fog of war that might obscure much of the current stage of play, do your best to take a broader view and change the perspective for the moment. There are several questions we can ask ourselves in this moment. What is the most important right now? And what might we be missing? How might things unfold from here? And what could we influence now that could pay off later? This ability to anticipate how things might unfold and to begin to act accordingly can help really avoid knee-jerk reactions as lead to poor outcomes. In the coronavirus context, if you are a leader of a grocery store chain, you are seeking a drastic increase in purchases. You must think about your supply chain, whether to ratio items and how to put safely protocols in place for customers. In addition, there are the questions of whether to modify store hours, whether to limit service to curbside pickup and delivery only, and how to handle staffing. All of these decisions are related, so you must pause and prioritize the most pressing issue first. That also means having the discipline to ignore distractions. So if we go to the next slide and looking to the process. So in cases of uncertainty or changes, leaders often feel an urge to limit authority to those at the top, with a small team making the big decisions while huddling behind closed doors. They should reject the hierarchical model that they might be more comfortable with in normal times and instead involve many more stakeholders and encourage different views and debate. This approach can lead to smarter decisions without sacrificing speed. Specifically, leaders can use a so-called fishbowl model in which decision makers and key experts sit around a table or a virtual table to make a decision. At the table are one or two decision makers and clearly define those, multiple experts, and one or two so-called empty seats for other relevant stakeholders in the gallery to rotate in as they have points to share. A majority of stakeholders observes the meeting, which builds understanding without having to make an extra communication step afterwards. There are many ways to facilitate those meetings. In an in-person meeting, stakeholders watching the fishbowl can contribute information and ideas by temporarily taking on the empty seats, briefly participating in the meeting, and then returning to the gallery. In a virtual setting, the stakeholders are on mute but can participate by raising their hands, with the moderator inviting them and unmuting them. So that we tried to apply more and more, and it works much better. To involve more people and facilitate efficiency of the meeting, it's important to clarify also the decision to be made right at the beginning. To identify the decision maker, it should only be a small number, and to identify who should have a voice and be clear that not everyone has a vote, and identify who will implement decisions and create a forum for rapid debate to take place. When following this approach, it's possible to involve a large number of stakeholders and experts without sacrificing speed, especially when things are unfamiliar and the decisions you are considering are bold. You need many points of view to make sure the decision makers aren't missing something. Once decisions are made, you can quickly pre-vote and speak to those who will be executing the decision to clarify the actions to be taken. timelines and accountabilities and answer any questions they have about what comes next. This not only saves time by removing a communication step, but it also can enhance the potency of the message itself. The next aspect, if we go to the next slide, is that some small choices that leaders make in a short run could loom very large over the long term as a crisis unfolds. They can be hard to spot, but leaders must look for them. So in the normal course of business, many big bet decisions are obvious. There are large cost or major impact, such as acquiring a company, marketing a product in a new geography, or shutting down a factory. With these decisions, but some decisions that seem small or routine at first can have large long-term strategic implications. Maybe an example related to coronavirus. So Netflix has gone to lower resolution streaming in some locations to ease the data load on information networks. So while most people won't notice a difference in quality, the decision could mean that the internet doesn't crash, which would be a big problem when so many people are working from home and children are relying on the internet to do their schoolwork. And there are several steps we can take to make critical small choices. So one is anticipate multiple possible scenarios for how things might unfold over time. No one has a crystal ball, and detailed, precise predictions are likely to be wrong. We know that because things are really in flux. Anticipating a range of possible pathways and general scenarios can be extremely helpful in thinking through what might happen. That is one point. The other would be making a list of 5 to 10 choices or actions that making today might depend on what happens, make a difference later. If we fast forward 6 months, identify a small decision or action that would have made all the differences if we had taken it, what might that decision or action be? The third point is to engage others to help identify which small decisions or action you could address now, in case they become the difference makers down the road. Which of these should you spend time on today? Which should you monitor and reconsider later? These decisions could range from actions to save cash or ensure liquidity to actions to beef up the resilience of your supply chain by quickly exploring alternative supplies. And I've read somewhere an interesting example that during the Boston Marathon in 2013, they did a critical small choice that made a big difference. So the decision was to disperse the severely injured people to 8 different hospitals. While some of those hospitals were farther from the bombing site, vascular surgeons were called to those locations to begin operating right away. If those victims had been sent only to the dozen hospitals, many would have had to wait for surgeries and possibly bled to death. So that was a small decision which had a huge impact as well. Moving to the next item or principle, then we see that in stressful times, leaders will have to make more these big decisions than before and will also be worried about their people. So when making a high-stake decision, it's important to be able to focus attention on the issue at hand. That means minimizing distractions. So if a leader is too occupied and just running around and too busy, they are likely to make errors in judgment. So creating a network of cross-functional teams, also called like a nerve center, can help leaders focus on the strategic decisions rather than the tactical ones. So a strategic decision comes with a high degree of uncertainty, a large likelihood that things will change, difficulty in assessing costs and benefits, and a result of several simultaneous outcomes. A tactical decision comes with a clear objective, usually, a low degree of uncertainty and relatively clear costs and benefits. Tactical decisions are important, sometimes really crucial. Yet they are often better left with those of an organization who act effectively without raising issues to a higher level. So what that means is one way to ensure that the right people will be the ones making tactical decisions is to set up these cross-functional teams. And this network of cross-functional teams with clear mandates connected with an integration team that sees that decision-making occurs thoughtfully and quickly, and each team focuses on single area or scope. So often the teams are for workforce protection, supply chain, customer engagement, and financial stress testing, for example. So these are central teams that keeps everyone coordinated. Basically you have the different cross-functional teams, but you would also need one, let's say, central team coordinating these different sub-teams to ensure collaboration and transparency. And the work is really done. And we made really good experience with this setup of this, what we call nerve center, and with the knowledge that it won't be perfect, but it helps really to focus on strategic decisions rather than tactical decisions. If we look at different examples for this one, for example, hospitals deal with emergencies all the time and are well equipped to do so. However, with the COVID pandemic, we have seen it's different. It requires setting up these nerve centers or these cross-functional teams so that decisions on staffing and the allocation of scarce resources can be made more quickly and by the right people. Some tactical decisions, however, that might have been made in the nerve center, such as the allocation of ventilators and the scheduling of elective surgery, will now need to be considered strategic decisions. It might be a strategic decision to convert a university dorm or a hotel or hospital to a hospital space, but making sure the space is functional is a tactical decision, and it should be in the full responsibility of a functional team here. The next aspect is empower leaders with judgment and character. So some people who get ahead are of a certain time. They say the right things, don't ruffle, don't know, and know how to navigate through the system and manage also messaging so that people hear what they want to hear. Many of these usual suspects who typically are tapped to lead special initiatives are ill-suited to lead in a landscape crisis of uncertainty. Leaders with the right temperament and character are necessary during times of uncertainty. They need to stay curious and flexible, but still can make the tough calls, even if that makes them really unpopular. They gather different perspectives and then make the decisions with the best interest of the organization and not their careers in mind, without needing a full consensus. So for decisions within their delegated authority, they escalate only the trickiest problems for input or approval. And someone said, in wartime, you might want to have a Winston Churchill, not a Neville Chamberlain. So when making the move to empower other leaders, don't just pick the usual suspects to lead your response, but some of them will be cut out for duty in times of uncertainty, but some will not. When choosing leaders, identify people who have done as many of what we think the three following things to increase the likelihood of them being successful in the current times of uncertainty. So these are, they lived by themselves through a crisis, a personal or professional crisis, and shown their mental and personal resilience. They made tough, unpopular decisions because it was the right time to do so, despite the fact that they took heat for it and potentially burned bridges or spent social capital. They are willing, giving bad news up the chain of command to leaders who didn't want to hear that. So you might not be able to find enough leaders with all the three criteria, but what we have seen, it's good that not to have someone who hasn't met any or none of them. So, and then what we have seen as well is once you have identified these leaders, encourage them to find their inner Churchill, how we call that. So remind empowered leaders that you expect them to make decisions with imperfect information. They should not strive to be perfect, as perfect is the enemy of speed, what we usually say. So make mistakes and learn from them. And do what is right, even if it's not popular. On the other hand, even or what has been mentioned in the panel discussion before, it stands to the reason that experience boosts performance. But a new study finds an exception when presented with negative information about a decision they have already made and acted on. More experienced people are likelier than others to stick to their guns rather than pivot to a better approach. So in this article, it's also been examined the impact on cardiologists of an FDA warning about a particular kind of coronary stents. So after the warnings was issued, use of the stents dropped by 56% overall. But the more experienced a doctor had, the more likely he or she was to continue using the device. So when sharing information that should cause people to update their beliefs, so managers must be prepared to address experienced individuals differently sometimes. So its intervention could include engaging them in perspective-taking exercises to clarify how a less experienced person might understand the situation better. Experienced individuals may need to be encouraged to directly pursue additional disconfirming information. As a way to provide learning, managers could share stories of experienced individuals who changed their perspective. So then, concluding here on the last slide, we see that unprecedented crises demand unprecedented actions. Lessons from past crises suggest that leaders are more likely to underreact. So what is necessary to take the bold and rapid action that would feel too risky in normal times? So decision making amid uncertainty is not easy, but leaders cannot afford to wait when events are moving as fast as they are doing right now. And we have made good experience with these five principles I showed, and to guide the organization through the crisis. And with this, maybe also in interest of time, I would like maybe to end now. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any burning questions or later in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabine, for this wonderful, wonderful presentation. I really loved the 5 principles and the way you were going in the field of decision making. I think really important to pause for a few seconds every time you have to decide, prioritize what is most important. I like the idea of rejecting hierarchical models and embracing fishbowl model. We do have a question, but I think since you have the other meeting coming up straight away, I would let you leave now, and we'll take the question at the Q&A, post-session Q&A at the end of the day. And with this, I give the stage to Simona, and I already see a lot of feedback coming, how great people found your presentation and absolutely love your presentation. So congratulations, and see you later during the day. And Simona, the stage is yours.
Thank you.
So thank you all for being with us for 1.5 days so far. You know the drill. We've got a networking break coming up. It's going to be a bit shorter since we had to reschedule the case study. However, we still have 30 minutes for you to grab a coffee, grab something to eat, or you can join the networking. There's an option to get randomly connected to a person for 20 to 180 seconds. So just on the side navigation menu, you can go for networking. When you're ready, you press play and then you get connected. You can exchange some information, and then later on, if you need elaborating some more on the topics that you opened, you can connect either through LinkedIn, as you usually do, but you can also connect on the community platform PPM Workout, which is something like social media network specifically designed for project portfolio and program managers in the pharmaceutical and healthcare industries. There's plenty of opportunities to grow your impact, to network, to ask questions in a visually appealing way. So it's a platform built for a community. We created the tool, and it's up to you to use it and to create your own rules how to make it happen. So yesterday I ran a demonstration. We'll be sending you later on a short summary of that. But you can still join it for yourself. The link is in the expo area in the booth PPM Workout. So just make sure to follow that link. In the expo area, you can also find the masterclasses information. We've got 3 masterclasses coming up, led by 3 fantastic speakers. We had the pleasure to hear Kelly Keane speaking today about the new ways of working, and she's an expert on CapEx and on the digitalization. She's also an architect, so there's plenty of topics you can learn in the upcoming masterclass, and more information on that is in the expo booth. And the last part of the networking options is the breakout rooms or roundtables or sessions, however you want to call them. So in the side navigation menu, you opt for sessions, and then you choose either post-session Q&A, where you can discuss the topics of those presentations that you witnessed in greater detail with other delegates or speakers, or you can join the roundtables on specific topics. So that's it from me, and enjoy this break, and we'll see you for the next presentation, or actually it's a panel discussion on the PMO's first 100 days in the digital era. So stay tuned, and we're looking forward to seeing you.